Perfect. I think that's a good start. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today's masterclass. My name is Shaista, and I'm currently working with GDI Partners. We also have my colleague Rashi, Aishi, Shrijin, and Sakshi with us, who will be joining us today and help us throughout the masterclass. So you can reach out to any one of us. We also have our founder, Ankur, who has gracefully agreed to join us and lead these masterclasses. But before I pass the space to Ankur, I will quickly share the plan for the next 1.5 hours that we're going to spend together. In this masterclass, we have two of our ongoing projects lined up. We have allotted good or 30 minutes to each of these masterclasses, followed by which we have an altogether 30 minutes for Q&A round. Quickly as a guiding prompt, I would request you all to note down any of your queries, thoughts, or questions that might come across during these masterclasses. You can also use the chat box to raise them, and our team will collate them together and raise them to all together in the Q&A round. Or you can use the Q&A round to directly raise your questions to Ankur. I think this is a good space to now pass the space to Ankur, where Ankur, could you please introduce yourself and take the baton forward?
Thank you, Shaista. Welcome, everyone. I know it's always hard to find time on Sunday afternoon when we already have many plans and all. So thank you for joining in. And we hope that the next hour or so, you'll find it useful with just seeing from the things from the other side, how as a consultant, we try our best to sort of solve the problem statements around agriculture and education. These are the top two topics we'll sort of pick up for today's discussion. And the idea of this discussion is to sort of give you a glimpse of how the life of a consultant is and how they really look at macro problem statements such as improving the quality of air, improving the income of the farmer, improving the learning outcome for millions of public school systems. So that's what we look at, the open-ended problem statement, how we structure, how we go about solving this. Because to begin with, all these problem statements looks very daunting. So most of the time that we struggle how to go about it, how to really solve these kind of things. So what we'll do is we'll just go into solving this and just keep this session engaging. If you have question, put it on the chat board like Shresha mentioned, or after every session, we'll wait for 5-10 minutes to take questions, live questions, and we'll sort of try and answer as many as we can. So without any ado, I'll just go through the agenda for today. Just 1 second. 1 second. So these are the two topics we'll try and sort of pick for today's discussion. We'll give you a very in 2 minutes idea of who we are, what we do, and where we work. The second is, before we get into the case, we'll just go into why a structured approach is required to solving any case studies. It could be the social sector case study, it could be the business case study, or it could be anything, why a structured approach is required. Then we'll pick two of our live engagement and we'll sort of showcase how we have at least attempted our way into these. And then we'll just leave the questions around open house. By the way, you'll see on the this thing also. So right now we are recruiting, and the last day to apply with us is Sunday, the 18th of September. So we encourage you to apply to that. And if you believe what we do is exciting and that's the career you want to choose, I will encourage you to sort of apply with us, as we are actively sort of seeking the application and all. As an organization, our mission is transforming the lives of individuals and communities for an equitable and inclusive world. So that's the mission statement all of us at GDI, we care a lot about, because we believe the world needs to be more equitable and inclusive for everyone. And when we say everyone, it has to be the human life, the animals, and the planet. So it needs to look at all those things. And the idea here is transforming the lives. The idea is whatever change we can bring through the sort of governance or other work we are doing, that's how the life of the individuals and communities sort of will improve. There are three types of work we do. First work is the governance transformation, where the idea is to co-work with the government. So we become the extension of the government, where we work with the leadership in the government. At times it could be the political leadership, and at times it could be the bureaucratic leadership on designing sort of programs around the large scale program. Those programs could be cross-sectoral, like the chief minister sort of the office or the digital transformation in the state, or they can be very specific to a sector like education, healthcare, agriculture, environment, and so forth. So that's the first work where we do very, very closely with the government. The second type of work we do is the program management, where the idea is to bring the efficiency and effectiveness in a already sort of a defined problem statement. If there is a already running program of government or a running program of a scheme of a government, how do we come in, really bring in the technology, the process changes, the policy support, or the data system to really bring in the efficiency and the effectiveness there. Third type of problem is the strategy design, where this is the third type of work we don't do a lot with the government. We do that work largely with the large philanthropic organization or the large social sector organization to help them create amplified impact for their chosen sort of work. The client here could be the large philanthropic organization and large social sector organization around the policy design, around the strategy design. Currently, we are present in 6 different states across the country, where we are doing projects in different domains. In Rajasthan, we are working on the digital education for girls. This is a case study we'll do in detail. Delhi, we are working in the environment department on improving the quality of air. We are doing a very interesting, innovative sort of a program with Niti Aayog, where the idea is to pick the 10 aspirational districts and really change the government procurement system around the outcome. So far, the government has been procuring the technology, the edtech, on an input parameter, but can we really try and do a pilot and create a evidence where the procurement can shift into the outcome? In UP, we are again working on education domain on a digital transformation unit. In Odisha, we are working with the Agriculture Ministry and with the World Bank to sort of create a program around modernizing the agriculture and the allied sector. This is also a case study we'll deep dive into, one of the work streams we'll deep dive into for our case study. Then we have recently started work with the Andhra Pradesh government to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the citizen delivery. It could be the DBT scheme, it could be some of the certificates like the caste certificate and so forth, by using the power of data. That's the work we are doing there. And in Punjab, we have recently started a work with the Chief Minister's Office on doing the cross-sectoral reforms and so forth. That's the India work, but now going into that, in this, so couple of programs we are doing in the African region as well. So one of the program where we sort of the Africa's first think tank, we created a 5-year strategy for them. And the second is we are creating a technological and a data tool, which will create the enablement of better decision-making through data in the evaluation space by reducing the time, by sort of improving the reliability, and also reducing the cost of that cost of evaluation in that field. Now that's the sort of the about us. Now I'll just take you through why a structured problem solving is required for anything. So at least what we believe is the 5 reasons why the structured problem solving approach is required. First is that ensuring that the right problem is getting solved. So idea is, because most time what happens is we in terms of, if you don't have a structured approach, then we end up solving the wrong problem at times. So the idea is we define the problem in a manner so the right problem gets solved through the process. The second is provide a comfort that our solution is watertight, because if we solve it in a very ad hoc manner, at times we miss out on certain very, very important components around it. So the idea is, how do we ourselves first get the comfort that we have looked at various angles to the problem, and our solution captures all those problems which were there in the larger problem statement. Third is, everywhere the resources are constrained, so it helps us to utilize our resources efficiently. So just to prioritize things better, just to understand where do we need to put in more resources, where we need to put the less number of resources, and so forth. Fourth and an important thing, which we internally call the answer first approach, that any problem you solve that, you need to have the answer first approach rather than a problem sort of a first approach. It helps you to move faster. It helps you to align people better. So that's the idea, and we'll see some of these things in the case study which we'll do. And the fifth but important thing is, because there are a lot of stakeholders involved in any case, right? Sometimes it could be the client, sometimes it could be communities, sometimes it your various team members within the team also. So it provides everyone a clarity that what the problem, what our framework is, what are the things we'll do now, what are the things we'll do after a few months, and so forth. So it is also a way to bring in a consensus, bring in a clarity in different stakeholders and so forth. So that's why we believe a good problem solving, a structured problem solving approach is needed for any professional working in this sector. Certain principles will come into that. First is deal with the key issue first, because at times, and I'm sure most of you would have realized in your career, in your undergrad times and so forth. So sometimes dealing with the key issue first becomes a big problem, right? So rather than solving the peripheral issue first we need to deal with the key issues. That's the principle of a very good problem solving approach. The second is follow a step-by-step approach. So rather than just doing a very ad hoc sort of a way of working, so follow a step-by-step, step 1, step 2, step 3. It gives you some sort of a method to solve a problem statement, because otherwise we'll always struggle and we'll always put a gamble to it. At times we'll do a good problem solving, and at times we'll not do a good problem sort of solving. So a structured follow a step-by-step approach is helpful in solving these kind of a problem statement. Third is because, say, for example, we look at how to improve the learning outcome for the public school system in a state, right? It's a very daunting sort of a problem statement. There are elements like improving the quality of teacher training. There is an issue around providing better content to the student. It is about involving the communities and so forth. So till the time we don't break a bigger problem statement into smaller problem statement, it becomes hard to move forward, because otherwise there is no silver bullet which can help and solve a problem statement by one initiative. Fourth, interesting one, it helps you to understand which are those levers which are under your control and which are those levers which are not in your control, because that is also important. So we are solving those things which are in our control first. Number 5, it helps you to sort of remove the blind spots also, because most of the work as sort of professionals we always do in team. So if we have a good sort of approach to solving a problem, it helps us sometimes to sort of remove our own biases also, and take input from your manager, take input from your stakeholder team, take input from your peer. That becomes very, very important. 6 is a very consulting sort of a kind of word, 80-20. That 80% of the problem can be solved by tackling 20% of the problems, right? So 20% of the solution sort of can solve the 80% of the problem. So how to apply that and not let the good be the enemy of the best, because at times by trying and solve the 100% of the problem, we are not able to sort of prioritize things better. So the idea here is, how do we prioritize those things, the 20% solution, which can solve the 80% of the problem. The 7th one is MISI. Some of you might know, some of you might not know. So MISI means mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So what it means is it reduces the overlap, but at the same time, it makes sure that all the aspects of the problem statements are covered. You can just Google it, but the idea here is to be comprehensive and to remove the overlap as much as possible. Very important skill which is required in the problem solving. Last, but we believe fully into this, is that as professional, you need to be excited. You need to have a mindset, a positive mindset when the problem statement you are solving, because sometimes when you are not excited about it, we all get overwhelmed with the problem statement itself. So idea here is just to be excited, just to have an attitude that we can solve it. It's not part of the sort of the toolkit or something, but something which is very, very important in our own mindset when we are looking at these kind of problem statements, which are very open-ended, which are very contextual also, I would say, because most of the time for the social sector, on the internet, on books and all, you don't find very good example of social sector cases and so forth. So I think very, very important to sort of look at problem statement with excitement. So that's this thing. So now I'll go into, and we'll share that also with the group. So Rashi and Shaishta, I'll request that all the candidates who have sort of applied for this, we sort of share that. It's a problem statement sort of a worksheet which you think. So first is important is to understand the context in which the problem is getting solved. What are the current situation? What has happened so far? What is the problem being addressed and so forth? What is the criteria for success? When will we see that the problem has been solved properly? What is our scope of solving the problem? Very, very important. So we are solving the relevant sort of a space and so forth. What are the constraints? What are the internal constraints? What are the external constraints we'll face into as we progress into solving a problem to the end to end? Who are the stakeholders? What are their roles? How they will influence what we are doing is very, very important. And the last is, what are the sources where we'll get the information? Sometimes the information. Just 1 second, 1 second. I think there's some issue. Sorry, guys, there was some sort of technical glitch, which I think always happens, the Murphy law. So apology at our end to sort of break the flow. But the idea here is the last one, the last point we were on it is just to understand where we'll get the information, because it's important before we even get into the problem statement, we need to understand the places where we'll get the information. Sometimes it could be the internal people who have worked on similar problem statement. It could be various publicly available information on various databases, various sort of news reports and so forth. And sometimes it could be the various industry report which comes out through the proprietary sort of insight with various organizations which publish these reports and all. So it's important before we even get into the problem, solving a problem. These are the 6 important criteria which need to be factored in by all of us to have a very solid sort of outcome out of this exercise. So again, repeating it, context is important, criteria for success, definition of criteria of success is important, defining our own scope of problems and solution is important. What are the constraints under which we'll be working in? Things like constraints could be when you are solving a sort of a education case during the COVID time. You need to understand, you need to sort of make your mind that for how long the schools will be closed, because that will be a constraint you will factor in as you are solving this. So important is sort of figuring out the constraints upfront. The stakeholders, who are the different stakeholders who are involved or the case will get influenced by, and the key source of insight, from where will we get the insight as we go along. So what I'll do is, this is why it's required. So wanted to spend at least 5-7 minutes on why a structured sort of approach to solving a case is required. Now we'll just wait for 5 minutes and let the question come in, let the sort of this thing, so we can address as many as questions around this before we coming into the actual case study which we'll do.
Hi, Ankur, I'm Katheni. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I think I missed it before when you were telling me the principles of problem solving. There was a point mentioned about 80-20, about when you are missing some data or some evidence. Can you explain me again, because I think I missed that point?
Yeah. So 80-20 is, I think it's a rule of thumb that, and it is applicable in any scenario. In most scenario, I will say not every scenario, in most scenario, that if there are, say, for example, you have come up with 10 problem statement around the education, right? Teacher training, student content, community involvement, data system, measure assessment, and various things, right? Most of the time, I think if we go about it, we can just realize that actually the 80% of the problems can get solved by focusing on the 20% of the sort of the problems, or 20% of the solution. What it means is not every problem statement or a micro problem statement have a equal amount of implication on the overall statement. So it is important to understand which are your high priority problem statement which you look at. I'll give you a very mathematical sort of answer to this. So if you look at the Delhi pollution, right? Delhi pollution, I'm talking about the pollution which gets generated from Delhi. I'm not talking about the pollution which comes from outside the NCR region and all. If you really look at it, there are various sources of pollution, right? It could be the biomass burning, it could be the construction site, it could be the vehicular pollution, it could be the waste dust, which is a big part to it, and all those things. There's a park dust and so forth. But when you start looking at the data, you realize that the vehicular pollution is the maximum in Delhi. And when you break it down, vehicular pollution also into further brackets like the two-wheelers, the four-wheelers, the passenger bus, passenger cars, and so forth, and the heavy vehicles. Then you also realize that in Delhi, at least, the major problem is actually the two-wheelers, because they are old, there is no PUC check on that and regularly and those things. So when you're solving this, rather than solving everything at once, you need to prioritize those areas which have the higher propensity to the overall problem. I hope answered your question.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Shubham has a message on the chat. When working on a project, do we list out all questions and brainstorm solution while doing the problem solving worksheet? Absolutely. So it's important. So actually, the question you have asked for, they are not either or the or. They need to be done together. So the idea in the first thing is the hypothesis-driven approach, which we'll probably not cover today. But the idea in the hypothesis-driven approach is just to be comprehensive there. So just to comprehensive, first of all, just to comprehensively map out what are the problem statements which are there, and against that, what are the solutions which can come in there. And that's the whole idea, to be sort of messy around there, because the idea in that step is to make sure that all the solution or all the problems you are coming in, they are mutually exclusively, but at the same time they are collectively exhaustive also. So that's the whole idea behind the principle of messy. Shubham. Yeah. So let me just try another one. Devansh Kedia has asked. So let me just simplify it. Let's look at ME together and CE together. So mutually exclusively, what it means is no one individual can appear in more than one category. So what it means is if something has been covered somewhere in the framework, it should not get repeated in other buckets of the framework, because then it will not be mutually exclusive, because you will always get confused whether it need to be covered here or it need to be covered here. So that's the whole point around mutually exclusive. Collective exhaustive means all category combined should be equal to the sum of it. In a very simply put word, I'm sure most of you have played the jigsaw puzzle, right? So CE, which is the collective exhaustive, means that all the pieces of the puzzle needs to be there. So if some pieces of the puzzle are not there, the puzzle will not get completed. So the idea in the collective exhaustive means that all the pieces of the puzzle need to be there. And that's why you need to be comprehensive in your approach. And that ties in with what Shubham earlier asked. Do you do all the solution, brainstorm on all the solution or not? So that's the whole idea, to on the collectively sort of exhaustive in there. I hope Devansh answered your question.
We have one more question by Mahima here. Mahima, if you could come off mute and ask.
Sure. Hello, good afternoon.
Mahima.
Could you elaborate on the answer first approach that GDI utilizes?
Yes, absolutely. Let's look at it from a very real lens. Let's say you're working at GDI, and you're working with a client, right? And the client is asking you, let's say, look at the problem statement around, I don't know, speak any, let's say education, right? So education, let's say COVID has just hit, and we are helping government to design a at-home study sort of a program, which is a massive change because so far the study was largely happening in school, and suddenly it starts happening at home. So it's a significant change, right? Where the school, in lack of better word, let's say school at that time becomes a slightly irrelevant unit, which has been the focus so far over the last many decades, right? Now the government sort of says, help us out on those things and all. Now it's an ever evolving situation, right? At that point of time, we don't know whether the lockdown will be for 2 weeks, 2 months, or it could be a year. Those are all the sort of ambiguity we are working on. So the answer approach first means that is, what is the answer today, right? It might change because your client will always be focused on answer as on day. You are always saying that this is not the final answer, but this is the answer today. Maybe tomorrow, more data points come, more thinking comes, the answer change, but that's the answer as of today. And why it's very different from a research focused approach, because research focused approach always first do a landscaping, first do this thing, then they test it out, and then they sort of propose a solution. But consulting, by the nature of the industry, it works very fast, right? And someone is hiring consultant because they are looking for answer. So you need to have a daily answer ready. So even if, say, for example, if the bureaucrat get transferred, because this is a norm, right? In government, you don't have any control on when the bureaucracy get transferred and so forth. So even if they're getting transferred to some other departments, to some other district and all, they always have the satisfaction that from till today, I had an answer. That answer was never final. The answer might take another couple of weeks and so forth. But when you start engaging people on an evolving answer, what we believe is actually that makes an action bias. And that's why we call ourselves as an action biased entity, because the approach is not to wait for the final answer to come, but having a daily answer with some sort of a preset justification to that, why that answer is important. And that's why we believe that, that's how the things sort of change when you have an evolving sort of answer to this. I'm not saying it's the best approach or it's the worst approach, but this is the way. So the consulting sort of works, and governance is a very dynamic space. So that's why you need to have an evolving answer as you are sort of progressing into this domain or this field.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
We'll take the last question, then we'll move in, because all these questions are interesting, but I think we need to do justice to the time we have sort of locked in your calendar on Sunday afternoon. So Rohit Sahu is asking, during government projects, especially, we major faces implementation fiasco. How do we resolve or get close to it? Rohit, very interesting question, and I think that's the genesis of firms like GDI. So our idea is not to sort of work at the strategy level or work at a policy level only. The idea is, we believe policy intent and everything, policy space in India has evolved quite significantly over the last many decades. The real challenge now which exists in the country, especially in the governance domain, is translating the intent or translating the benefit of the policy at the grassroots level. When I say grassroots level, it could be with the farmers, it could be with the patients, it could be with the students, it could be with any citizen who is expecting some sort of a scheme or services from the government. And I think that's where our role comes in. So we don't work on strategy alone. Strategy is important because it gives you a roadmap, which direction you need to move forward. How we solve it is, there are 4 or 5 tools we use it. One is using the simple technology, right? And those simple technologies are as simple as WhatsApp. Creating the WhatsApp bot, creating channels at a student level or at an official level on WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is in their lives. So rather than creating a new system, we use simple technology to sort of solve the information gap around it. So first is the technological solution, the simple technological solution, because it's required to scale standards, because in lack of technological solution, you cannot scale those things. The second idea is the process re-engineering. Most of the time, some of the processes which are designed in the government, they are slightly old now. with the advent of sort of the ecosystem around us, it could be technological, non-technological solution. The space have really evolved in the last many decades. So how do we really change some of the processes which they can become agile, nimble, and faster and more efficient? That's the second tool we use. Third tool we use is around using the power of the data. So whatever the data get generated out of the government system or non-governmental system also, it could be the Google analytics or something, how that can drive the better decision making by the policymaker, right, on the implementation issue. That's the focus there on the third. And at times it's the policy support also. If we feel that there are some policy which need to be tweaked to solve the issues in the current realities. So that's the tweak we do. So these are the 4 or 5 things we do. And the other thing is we also believe that these change require time to come in. It's not like overnight these things will solve. So most of our project, 80% of the project, you will see they are multi-year project, 2 to 3 years this thing, because the idea is to reiterate also on these solution. Because if we try something and there are chances, most of the time, some feedback comes from the ground, some feedback from the government, and some of our learning also by looking at the data and all. So how do we reiterate those solutions? So they fundamentally change, sort of improves the quality of the solutions on ground. That's the idea we look at. So that's the sort of question. Please keep putting a question. We'll come back to them, but in the interest of time, we'll just now move on into the next sort of the section in the presentation, which is around solving a case. So the case we look at today is one of the live project which we are working with the Odisha government. The name of the program is Modernizing Agriculture and Allied Sector through Multifold Initiative. So the idea is there's a lot of technology which has come into our lives, but how do we now use the technology, now use the data to sort of solve the lives of the smallholder farmers around the state and so forth. And we'll look into that. There are various levers we are using across the program, where there are how to integrate the markets better, how to improve the coordination within the different government departments around this problem statement of modernizing the sector. Third is improving the government capacity. It could be in the data, it could be technology, or it could be coordination and so forth. And we'll be sort of doing a agri-tech challenge, where we will be inviting the innovative agri-tech companies across the country to sort of come and work for those issues and so forth. So that's a program. Program is much wider. So the idea we have looked at from the today's session perspective, for this particular project, we will look at one work stream, one very specific work stream, and we'll go deeper into that, so you understand that. And in the second case study, which is around the education program in Rajasthan, we'll be looking at a framework, or we'll be looking at a structure at an overall program level. So you see the difference, because problem solving is required both at the program sort of framework, but at the same time at the individual work stream level. So we'll be just going in this program at the work stream level or an initiative level, how use the word. I'll be using the work stream and the initiative interchangeably, but no difference at all in those two. So the problem statement is, how can we best communicate market price information to farmers? Let me give you some more idea to this. You would have seen in India, or at least you would have heard or read in media, that there is a lot of price distortion which happens at a farmer level, because there are a lot of middlemen which are involved, or a lot of systems which are involved between the farm and the plate. That's the whole idea. The farm, when the crops are grown at the farm level, and by the time that food comes on our plate, there are a lot of people involved in the value chain and so forth. That's how the pricing of a commodity gets determined. So the whole idea is, how can we determine the prices of all these commodities which are grown by different farmers in the state better, so they have a better agency, because information at the end of the day is an agency to the one, right? For us also, any extra piece of information is an agency for us to negotiate the outcome better. So here we are looking at providing the communicating the sort of the market prices better to the farmers. How we'll do that. So that's the problem statement. We'll go into a very step-by-step process. So first step is understanding the problem statement in detail. What we are looking there is, what are the market stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders in the market which are relevant? So there are market yard staff, commission agents, hamalis, and the traders, which are important stakeholder in the procurement of the commodities, right? What is the pre-auctioning process which happens, right? There is a space which is allocated, there is a cleaning of that needs to be done, grading and sorting, which determines what's the quality of your produce, because the quality of the produce determines how expensive or how inexpensive your final sort of the price would be, and the packaging part to it. Then the price realization, how the auctions are conducted, what are the deduction which happens, and how the payments are done. Are they done more in cash, or there is some sort of a voucher which is given, or they are done in UPI method and so forth. There are various methods of it. So it's important to understand those parts of the problem statement for this before getting into that. What we sort of found is that while the same process is followed in most markets, the prices of the commodity vary significantly across the market. So there are hundreds of markets in a state like Odisha, and the price sort of fluctuates from one market to another and so forth. Additionally, some crops will get a higher prices than the widely cultivated crops. What we found was that, there are certain crops which are being grown the most, but the price realization for them is actually lower than some of the known sort of the known majority sort of cultivated crop in Odisha. Then what we did was we formed and validated our hypothesis. So some of the hypotheses we looked at, around that, whatever was data was available, we sort of mapped it out just to realize what happens. Now in this, you will see the prices of two sort of markets, one in the red, which is the Bargarh market, and one is in the green, which is the Padampur market. So we had this hypothesis before even collecting the data. The two statement in the green at the bottom, these were the problem statement. When we tried and procured the data for two markets, we realized that actually it was true. If you look at, this is the tomato, tomato is the crop, and we are looking at two sort of market in a same district around this, and we are realizing we will see a huge difference in the price, right? The other thing is the price availability at certain places. There are a lot of gaps in that. That is also not there. So we need to sort of solve for that. And the directionally also you will see here the price is going down in one market, while in this there is a slight improvement or basically a stagnant sort of price. So sometimes these are interesting sort of an insight for you before you take the next step, right? Because now there is no bias. This has been validated by the data which has been there in the public domain. We looked at the data and it strengthens our own hypothesis as we are going into that. That's the second step. Third step is, okay, we need to design it, but what would be the parameters? Define your solution parameter. So we decide that first we need to develop a mechanism for price dissemination. We need to figure out what's the best way to disseminate the price to the farmer and to the government bureaucrats also. And when we say government bureaucrats, we talk about bureaucrats at the state level, at the district level, at the block level, at the village level. How those price availability happens, a longitudinal price information or a price information availability of different markets, how that needs to be done. The mechanism is important to do that. The second is providing real-time prices, because knowing the price for last week or 2 weeks or last month, that is not relevant because it's during the time of procurement. These are very heavily sort of highly frequent sort of prices fluctuation which happens in the market. How do we sort of do that? And what are the insight? What are the actionable which we need to put in out from this real-time analysis of this? That is the important. That's where we are defining the solution parameter. Third is nudging the farmer towards the non-cereal crop. There is a state sort of a mandate where state wants to diversify from paddy. So 70 to 80% of the farmers in Odisha, they cultivate paddy as a crop. So the idea here is how can we shift the focus from paddy to non-paddy crop? So that also needs to be there. The focus needs to be there because price can play a big role when you're nudging the farmer from crop A versus crop B. So that needs to be factored in here. Fourth is reducing the information asymmetry. Like I mentioned, information is agency for people to sort of negotiate, people to sort of have a better view of things. So how do we provide information? How do we reduce the information symmetry around this? That's step number 3. Step 4 is we looked at, okay, what are the different building blocks of the solution which will come in? We looked at what are the features, where the data is coming from. AgMarkNet is a Government of India sort of a portal where the information is available. ENAM is also live Mandi where the data is there. And then there is a desk, Department of Economic and Survey in Odisha, which also provides this data. Now, 3 places where the data comes. So we looked at what are the features of these data points, what are the advantages of this, what are the disadvantages of it. And why it's important is because this is a time when you are really piggybacking on that. This is the source of data we'll consider as a truth, because most time you will also find some of you in education who would have worked in education, you will find the state enrollment data and the UDICE enrollment data and the data which has been told in the ASA report can sometimes vary. And it's not they are wrong or right or whatever, but because they have used a very different methodology to arrive at the same metric, so sometimes there can be variation. So you need to understand what are those things which need to be there. So like if you look at AgMarkNet, some of the features are, that's data which is provided at the market level, the wholesale prices of the market level at a monthly and the weekly. It captures the minimum price, the maximum price, and the average price, which is district-wise, market-wise, and so forth. And the arrival data is available in turns by the APMC. So the market which are there at the APMC level, they report the data. At the ENAM, it track the prices. Crop-wise available, the unit is also available, the traded amount is also available, data is available. And similarly, there are a lot of pros and cons which comes in terms of selecting this. 5th is sourcing your building block. So where we looked at what do we have there, right? So this is the database which is there at AgMarkNet sort of a portal. What kind of data can be made available? Because if you really look at it, if you're designing the solution, if you're designing a dissemination metric to this, you need to make it regular. You need to make it tangible. You need to link this data to some sort of a communication channel. It could be a WhatsApp, it could be SMS, it could be IVRS, it could be the infographics, everything. How does that data connects there? So we designed some sort of an API around that. It's a technological term which connects this data to another data set or to another system in a real-time basis. As soon as there is some change which happens here, that gets notified here. And whatever layer you are building on this sort of link, on this piece, that gets reflected on the farmer-centric sort of this thing. That's the 5th step around this. Of the 2 available data, we could only get commodity price. So the idea here was to get the commodity price, which was available through API. So this is what we sort of captured in. So where some of the problem statement we looked at, this is the final sort of a design around this, where 70 markets across all districts can be mapped. Last 3 year data is made available, because the reason is we can see the fluctuation month by month and year by year, because there are inflation also which need to be factored in. So the policy maker can really understand the implication of it when they are designing some sort of a policy or some sort of a around this. What we decide was, like I said, the answer first approach, and someone asked this, so I'll just make it real here with this example. We looked at 10 priority communities in phase 1. One idea was, say if there are 40 commodities, we wait for 40 commodities price to come in before we design the solution. But the answer first approach is, let's at least make the system for the 10 priority approach, because these are the 10 priority sort of crop which will cover a majority number of sort of farmers. So the idea applies, the 80-20 also applies here, while the other commodities are important and they will get built in. But you need to have an answer for today, because the system needs to start becoming useful for many stakeholders as soon as possible, rather than wait for a one grand system to come in and so forth. It provides you the it provides you the date range from which you can sort of get the information. It can also provide you the historical prices trend. So for the policymaker, not very relevant for the farmer, but for the policymaker, these fluctuations can be managed better at the state level and so forth. It provides an annual comparison showing the percentage change in the same market at the last year prices. So if you look at it here, it tells you that previous price was 2,600, this year it's 2,100. So there is a drop of tomato in the Burger district around that. And it provides the certain community, so you can see the annual change, the drop of the higher thing, which is very, very relevant for that. So that's the prototype which was built for the government stakeholder, not for the farmer, because for farmer, it's just too much of information. Now, this is again a prototype to build the solution. I'll not go into that detail. So which provides you at a very quick glance, weekly trend, so it's dropped by 1.1%. Monthly trend also dropped by 1%. So government can define their safe buffer zone and see, and then you see the color coding of various districts around that, the prices and all those things, which you'll see here. For the farmer-centric testing, so on the right-hand corner, the bottom corner, you will see these are the kind of information. For the case study perspective, for the today's case study perspective, we have converted that into English. But for when we did it real, it was done in a Odia language because farmers can only understand that. So you will see an icon here which denotes paddy, which denotes mustard, groundnut, and so forth. So because there will be various farmers who might not be able to read or write because we have not reached a stage in the country where the literacy levels are 100%. So the idea here is using the icons, using the sort of the dates and everything. So somewhere the date prices are not available, the season prices were available. So they were made, what are the prices, what are the varieties, what are the markets, this thing. And then we did that for 58,000 this thing. So there were two ways. One was the WhatsApp, which we just looked at. And the other was the Amakrushi, which is a state government owned sort of a telehelp method of making the phone calls to the farmers, the IVRS and those things. Those were converted there. And this is the, I don't know how many of you can read the Odia. I myself cannot. But I think what it means is that it's a script where we are mentioning to them that, this is the price for this variety. And also we are providing the price of another commodity. So where I talked about earlier, the nudge element, right? So one of the objectives we defined around the nudge part to it, I'll just come to there, farmer nudge towards non-cereal crop, where when the cereal crop prices were being advised to the farmer, at the same time, a non-cereal prices were also being informed to the farmers, and that non-cereal crop prices were determined by the agroclimatic zone, that what is the non-cereal crop which has been grown in that particular area, that particular block or that particular sort of district. So that's how it was done. So that's how we looked at it. But so these are some of the, I can just skip this, not relevant for this. So what we are now doing is we are also sort of evolving that with the CEDA, which is a Center for Economic and Data. So where we are enriching the commodity arrival data, because we have looked at the pricing data from there. Now we are integrating that with the price and the quantity data. So the quantity data will now start coming from this. Integrating whatever data is available for the ENAM, because when the system becomes more stable, now we are saying, can we get the more real trading data also available? That can also help various stakeholders, the private sector and others to do that. That's a tangible thing, very technical sort of a thing, where we are solving some of the API issue around it. Why we are sharing that with you is because in many of these things, you will find that problems are never solved absolutely in this thing. Problems are always gradually solving, but the idea is not to stop, really start building something and taking the cue out of it and really build a system which can evolve, sort of at least solve for some issues at this point of time. So now I'll just again pause here before going into the next session, which is a more of a engagement level or a project level framework. So we'll just pause here, take some of the questions. Over to you, Shrestha.
Yeah, I would request everyone to pose your questions. We also have a few questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
Would be great if you come off mute as well, because we have still some time in hand. Ankit, if you could go ahead. So
Ankit question, can I read it from the chat itself?
Yeah.
So Ankit, you have put a question. I'm just reading the last question. How do you come to a hypothesis in the first place? Very crudely tell, I think hypotheses are something which can be biased also, right? So this is an exercise which is done jointly. For example, if we are solving this case which we have just looked at, right? So we'll say, some team member will say, we think there is an agency problem. Farmers are never aware of what the prices of different commodities are. So we'll say, okay, looks like a reasonable thing. Let's write it there. So we write that as a hypothesis. Someone will come and say the nudge part, right? That also came through a hypothesis. Some team members said, maybe farmers are used to know the prices of commodities which they grow, but they might not know the prices of some of the commodities which could be more profitable for them. So we said, okay, let's write that as a hypothesis. by knowing the prices of an alternate crop, the farmer can shift their behavior from paddy to a non-cereal crop. That's a hypothesis we write. So Ankit, most of the time, this is done in a brainstorming sort of a session between the teams. And the idea is there, once we have written the hypothesis, the idea is not that all the hypotheses what we are writing are actually true. Then there is an element which is done, which is testing the hypothesis. Now, if someone has said that by providing the price of a known paddy crop to a farmer, the behavior will shift. Now, the next step becomes testing the hypothesis. And testing the hypothesis here could be just meeting the 10 farmers, 20 farmers, and just showing them whether if this is something which they get regularly, does it help them? Does it provide a sort of an incentive for them to sort of do it? And then looking at the data. And at times, the hypothesis which you are writing on the first day can be proven wrong also. But that is also fine, because at least you have tested it out. So that hypotheses are designed to sort of remove the biases, because whatever your biases are, you put it there. But then there is a clear sort of a path which is written against every hypothesis, that how will these hypotheses get tested, and hypotheses will sometimes get proven, sometimes get sort of rejected. When they get rejected, we just cut it out. When they are proven right, then we say, okay, now this is what we need to solve. How do we solve it? Then the shift focuses on whether it's important or not to how it need to be solved. So that's how the hypothesis sort of approach is sort of taken into consideration. So that's the question. Kritika has asked, I'm moving to the next question. Ankit, hopefully it has addressed your the question or a part of your question. Kritika has asked, how do you go about finding the everyday price data? So Kritika, there are various private sector government intervention which are there in the public domain and sometime in the government, which exist there. So the idea here is the slide which I showed. In this particular case, I looked at three. One is the AgMarkNet data, one is the ENAM data, and one is the DES data. So these are the three sources of data which are relevant for Odisha. Then we looked at the pros and cons of those data, and then we selected one out of the three for that. So that's how it was done. At most of the time, like we are developing something on a fisheries also, a fish pricing information system. For that, the data is currently not available. So there, the idea is we have created three options for the government, how the data can start becoming available to the government and to the farmer, where there are different mechanisms. Some is through government machinery, some is through outside government machinery, some is directly from the farmer. And then there are again the pros and cons, the cost implication to it, the sustainability around it. So we are measuring those things, and that will come there. So that's not a very tough problem, Kritika, to be honest, to get to that. So that's the question around there. Amit Vikram Devan has asked a question. Am I correct in understanding that the solution are aimed more at making improvement and bringing tangible changes beneficial to stakeholder instead of working on a perfect solution, so to say? I would sort of not say it's either or, and that's where the point comes in. Every solution have its own time horizon, right? So first you design a solution which brings the incremental gain, but at the same time you need to also know what the absolute gain is. So solutions are not made in a day or made in a week, right? But incremental gain is important, because when you look at systems from the governance perspective, there are millions of people who will be looking at that solution. So having that idea that one solution will solve everything sometimes is not the right solution. You need to test it out, but keep building on that solution. I'll give a very tangible sort of a example also, which most of you would be familiar with. The COVID app, right? The app which sort of registered our vaccination slots and everything, right? So when the app came in, it worked fine, but the new information came out that because the registration of app is only possible through a smartphone device or an internet connection, and not everyone has a smartphone. So actually in COVID, the feature was put in, which allows 6 or 8 people to register from one sort of a login. So now you can say the absolute solution was not made on day one, but it was important to get the vaccination up and rolling, and the new information which starts to come in, then you build over your sort of a solution. So that's approach. I will not say it's the either or the or approach. It's more of a time frame how you want to pace out your solution. we as a professional should always aim for an absolute sort of a solution, but at the same time, not wait for a good solution to come out at day 1 or day 2, just because we are working on a great solution which will come on day 100 and so forth. So that's what at least we fundamentally believe in, Vikram, in the organization. And having tested it out also, we have seen that some of the solutions take time to sort of get embedded into the system. So it's important to have a solution rather than just keep thinking about the solution. So that's the idea there. Amit hopefully answered this question, at least from our perspective, how we see things from where we are. Mridula has asked a question in an answer first approach, which makes sense given the ambiguity. This, if we go by, let's say, the first 10 commodities out of 40, isn't there a chance of the data of the following solution being misleading at times since we are working with the limited data? Yes, it happens, Mridula. Fair answer is yes. But I would say 10 commodities, again, we have not gotten a chance to go into the which commodities we have picked. So there was some science, which was put in the selection of the commodities. Some were the fruits, some were the vegetable, some were more the pulses and so forth. So the mix was taken into consideration. Some were high perishable, non-high perishable. Some were which are grown more, some are which are grown in a very small geography and so forth. So those combinations were given. Maybe there is a chance, but some of the thinking is, Mridula, taken care at the time of selection. When you are from a census, you are selecting a sample. Some of the thinking is taken into consideration when that comes. Again, will not say these are 100% tight, this thing, but it's okay, right? Because ultimately the 40 commodities will come and you need to set up the feedback mechanism in your solution. So even if you have missed out certain elements in the pilot phase or in the first phase, you at least have some sort of a feedback loop which is coming in, which makes you sort of to make those tweaks and so forth. So that's why co-working the solution with the government machinery till the ground level to the state level officers is equally important, and taking as many beneficiary input while designing becomes important. How did you test the hypothesis? Tanishq, I'll not go into that because we have talked about it. Maybe you joined late or something, but the idea is the hypothesis get tested through various ways. It can be tested at times by looking at, by the secondary data. Sometimes it requires field visit. Sometimes it requires the expert interviews. Sometimes it requires surveys also, right? Sometimes, various channels which exist. So the idea there is just to have an answer, and hypothesis also, if you look at it, it's written like an answer, but you're testing it out against some sort of a primary or the secondary source. That's the whole idea. Tanishq, so I've given you in a very quick minute answer, not giving you the context, but there are various tools which are there to test those hypotheses and so forth. So I think these are the questions which were there on the chat board. Try to answer all of them, but we'll just wait for another couple of questions. If someone has it, please put it out there in the chat, and I'll try and address it.
Ashok here. Can I voice over my question?
Yeah, sure. You can go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, as one of the part was nudging the farmers to take a non-cereal thing. So that is one part where we are making aware that there are other crops which they can take up. But it also needs the second part is that once they know that, what are the steps they should take about it? So we are also looking for the solutions, the next steps which they should take it, or we just providing the information?
Yeah. So Ashok, like we mentioned, for the purpose of this case, we looked at a very specific problem statement. Again, there are ways where the advisory, which I think I showed in the slide also, the Amakushi part, which is the advisory mechanism in the state, that need to be integrated also, because just by providing the information, that's half the problem. But the idea there is to integrate, if someone, some nudge needs to be done, what are the support which the government is providing and so forth, that also gets captured through the other mechanism which are there in the government. Yeah, Aman has asked a question, how difficult is it to bring a political leadership, bureaucratic leadership, and the citizen on the same page regarding the same problem? How we are able to do that? I think, Aman, we all know the answer. I think in the friends also, which movie to watch, we always have a diverse sort of opinion. Someone was different opinion. So people have different preferences, and in the families also that happens. And similar thing applies. So it's not something very, very absurd. that bringing in sort of every different stakeholder on some page is a tricky situation, but it does happen, right? And the problem need to factor in, or the solution need to factor in the win-win for all. That's the whole point we have learned in. And I think it's important that it's aligned with the political sort of the priorities. Bureaucratically, it's through administration it needs to be possible, and for citizen it should be solving their problem and so forth. So, and various other parts to it. It's difficult, but I'm not going into that domain because that will require another hour or so to do a session on bringing people on some day. But it's possible, and I think yeah, if there is a right solution which factors in the win-win from everyone, most of the time those solutions do see the light of the tunnel. So that's what I'll say. How much time is usually kept gone in testing multiple hypotheses for a project? How does it affect the answer for? Defining the hypothesis doesn't take that long. It can be done jointly in a team in a very quick period of time. Within a one session, you can come up with a hypothesis for the entire project, which can be messy, which makes sure that these are comprehensive, these are not overlapping and so forth, can be done fairly quickly. Testing can take time, Ayushi. Testing can take time, depending on the context also, depending on the situation and so forth. But it's fine, right? That's the whole point of it. But don't think it will take months, right? It's a matter of doing these things in weeks. So if the idea is whether it takes a year or a month, I will say it takes few weeks to test even the most complex of the hypotheses. Some of the scientific hypotheses, right? What is the right formula for the vaccine or those things, that can take much longer. But as a consultant, we are not trying to solve that. We're trying to solve these things. So from few days to, I think, few weeks, I think I would say a good estimation of how long do these things do take time. So hopefully Ayushi gives you some sense of the time frame.
I think we are good to go to the next project now.
Great. Guys, just you can keep putting your questions and I'll try and pick them up as we come along. Shasha, is my screen visible?
Yeah, good it is.
Okay. So I think the second program we will look at now for the second case study is slightly different. First of all, the domain is different. It's education, the digital education specifically. The second difference is in a different state, Rajasthan. And the third difference also from the case study perspective is we will look at a very different angle of problem solving or a framework in this program, because this is our first program as an organization. So what we will try and sort of look at is how the framework needs to also be sort of dynamic and not static, because this program has gone through different phases itself. So we will look at how the frameworks have evolved as we move from one stage of the program to another stage to another stage. So that's the whole perspective we'll try and look at. What's the sort of the focus of the program is providing digital access to 1 million girls, adolescent girls in the state of Rajasthan, which is focusing on grade 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, where the idea is to provide access, but at the same time improving the quality of the education, and also providing equitable access, because although the program doesn't exclude the boys, but at the same time, there's a larger focus on the girl education, because when you look at the data of states like Rajasthan and all, they made a huge stride forward in the last few decades, but still on an absolute level, you will see the enrollment number, the access numbers for girl child really are not as on par with the the male child. So that's why the focus of this program is and so forth. I'll just request if you guys just to mute yourself because there's some background sort of noise. So please mute yourself, and when you have to ask the question, you can unmute or you can just type in. Some of the elements, the main lever of impact in the program is through personalized adaptive learning. The idea is because when you're shifting the child learning or augmenting the child learning through the digital sort of devices, the idea is to provide a personalized adaptive learning, because every child is at a different level. The need of every child is very, very different. So the solution needs to have in the personalization as well as the adaptiveness in the way it's been designed. Idea here is not to replace the teacher, but really to support the teacher. So how to train the teacher, how to build the capacity of the larger ecosystem in the state. So these kind of solution can scale and sustain. Third is consistent data on learning outcomes. So we always know that whether we are moving in the right direction, whether we are not moving in the right direction, what are the tweaks, what are the changes which need to be done as we go along, and also create a lot of evidence around this, because there's a lot of digital influx in the sector, but really the evidence is what is lacking in the sector. So the whole idea through this program is also we create that evidence, which becomes the backbone for some of the larger, even the larger sort of the initiative which are designed in years to come. And the fourth part is the blended learning model. Blended is where how you are integrating both the digital education with the in-class education, or the offline, the teacher and the student sort of training interaction there. So that's the whole idea around this. As far as we sort of know, is this is pretty much India's largest attempt to bring in the personalized and adaptive learning in the public school system ever. So very audacious in its scale as well as in its aspiration. So important is sort of do it well and create that evidence which can really accelerate some of the reforms towards the education reform in the country. That's there. Some of the things how Mission Bunyad contributes to the digital education vision. First is the objective of the program sort of ensures the access to the digital device and the adaptiveness learning model, which helps the customized teaching for the girl student. It provides a blended learning model for integration of offline and the online sort of the processes, which is revision, pre-post test, adaptive content, teacher strengthening, and various other parts of the schooling, the teacher-student transaction, which happens in a physical world. It provides data in a real-time basis, which enables stakeholders such as the principal secretaries, the directors, the district officials, students, teachers across all levels. So everyone is on the same page. Someone asked a question, how do you bring everyone on the same page? So I think one of the way to do that is creating one version of truth for everyone, because like we have looked at, there are various sources of data of the same thing. And at times, people sort of pick the data which aligns with their sort of win-win. So the first idea is to create a system which generates one version of truth for everyone. That's very important in this program as well. And the other idea is, and this is a very unique sort of a proposition, is enabling the existing ICT infrastructure. Over the last 10 years, government has put in hundreds of crores, if not actually thousands of crores of money into enabling ICT infrastructure in the government schooling system. And every time you will hear that now new tablets are being given to school, new tablets are given to sort of children and all. So here we are taking an approach, rather than just giving more and more ICT, can we really strengthen the existing ICT, which is not optimally being used or optimally being enabled yet? It's operationally a very difficult task, but I think the maximum sort of the scale or the maximum impact will come through solving the existing thing, rather than creating a more and more ICT infrastructure, because it's not cost effective. And also there has to be an end of that thing also, and the money can sort of be used somewhere else, because the resources are limited at the end of the day, right? So these are some of the how Mission Bunyad is contributing. So we started this program almost a year and a half back. These are broadly the phases, different phases of the program. Why I'm saying this is because then we'll see how the frameworks have evolved in different stages of the program. So first we did the diagnosis, which is just understanding the landscape of Rajasthan, landscape of education system in Rajasthan, understanding the gender element in the education in Rajasthan, and understanding the ICT element in the Rajasthan state. Second is designing the interventions around it, where one of the key elements was how to create the buy-in from the government, because government has to be a key stakeholder if that level of scale need to be achieved. Then there was a pilot which was done in sort of 6 districts out of 33 districts. So create the evidence to modify or to really strengthen the sort of the processes around which can sustain the scale and so forth. And then the handover happens to the government. That's the last 3 to 4 months of the program. So that's how the sort of the timing of the project sort of pans out over a period of 3.5 years. Now what I'll do is I'll just give me 1 second, guys. I'll just get water. Just give me one second. I'll be back. Sorry, guys. So yeah, restarting that. So like I mentioned, there are different phases to the program. So we'll go into the framework, which was designed to solve the problem which I just discussed from the diagnosis perspective, because this was a day zero, basically day zero. Before we started diagnosis, we just created a framework. So we are understanding the lay of the land through all possible things which might be important for us to sort of design a very good sort of a solution. So I'll come into that. So we'll just look at framework first right now. So first is looking at the goals. Sorry, this thing is maybe the size is not optimal to read it, but I'll just read it. The first layer is we just said, let's just define what the outcomes of the programs were. So we sort of provided a very measurable targets here. First one was the board pass percentage, because class 10, class 8 and 10th and 12th in government school in Rajasthan are the board classes. So there is a 4% increase in the learning outcomes, which is the target which we put in for the program. The second is the learning outcome. So there is a third party evaluation, which is happening in the program. So on the learning outcome, how much the learning level have improved. So there the target is 8%. And the third is the reach target, which is the 1 million girls. So these are measurable targets which has been put at the center of the framework. So every time, everyone who is looking in this framework, so they know what the targets are as we are approaching this problem state. Now we look at the second layer of it, and you will see this sort of the framework will keep evolving in a concentric circle sort of a fashion. And there is a method to this, I'll come into that. So we said, if this is the goal and digital is a way, let's look at where the digital access can be enabled for the students. First is the personal devices. Personal devices are the phones largely of the parents or the guardians or the neighbors of these kids. How can we enable learning on the digital devices from the phone perspective for the student? Second is the school infrastructure, which is one of the larger part of this. School infrastructure, school has various ICT infrastructure. It's a smart board, sometimes it's projector, sometimes it's the desktop, sometimes it's the tablet and so forth, which is sort of created in the schools. So that's something in the broader bucket of school infrastructure, which has been created there. Third is the community infrastructure. Some of you who would have worked at the grassroots, you will recognize many states have a lot of infrastructure, government-sponsored infrastructure, which is created at the grassroots level. So in Rajasthan, there are things like kiosk centers, e-Mitra Kendra, where the citizens can avail various government schemes and services. So that's the infrastructure which is under the control of the government. And there are a lot of community centers also, which have been designed for social gathering of various groups, and everything. So where in certain of these community halls and all, there is some infrastructure which is existent. And the Bunyad infrastructure, we provided some tablets to some of the students just to test it out, test our hypothesis, and also we have a quick feedback as we are enabling other of these things. So this second concentric circle focuses on the digital device. Now the next one, now the digital devices needs to be enabled by the pedagogy, and this pedagogy need to be what the students are studying in the classroom. Because if that pedagogy is not aligned with what the students are studying in their classroom, the teacher will always be confused, because they'll have to teach something else in the digital devices and something else in their offline classes. So how that need to be aligned with the curriculum of the state. And the next part, the bottom sort of the half circle, is the tech solution. How the tech solution, and there are various parts to it, will not go into that, but every piece of this framework is further sort of detailed down in the individual slides. So we'll not go into that, but we'll look at the framework from the program perspective. So the tech solution need to be adaptive, tech solution need to be personalized, tech solution need to be in a manner which has least number of dependency on the variable. And those variables can be things like access to internet, it could be the hardware or the software elements to it. So that's what need to be considered when we are designing the tech solution around it. Now, after that, so that's fair and fine, but this is not complete, right? So if you look at it, we know the goals, we know what the devices would be, now we also know how the devices will be enabled by pedagogy and by tech solution. But there is a further layer to this, which is very, very critical. When you are looking at there is a gap. So this is actually incentive. So there is some sort of animation issue here. So this is the incentive framework here. So now for this, the second and the third concentric circle to scale, it need to be sort of joined by or glued together with various pieces to it. There need to be a communication and awareness of every stakeholder needs to be there. There need to be an augmentation of the human resources where the roles and responsibility of the block officer, the district officer, the teacher, the head teacher, the ICT in charge, the directors, the principal secretary, the education minister, and everything need to be detailed down. Accountability, who will be accountable for what and how often will they get accountable, their accountability will get measured. The next part is the funding, because these kind of program, if you really need to reach to 10 lakh girls, there has to be a lot of augmentation of funds. So the fund can come from government, funds can come from the central government, the state government, or from various CSR organizations which are existence in the state. There has to be a framework around the measurement where we are measuring various KPIs at the student level. Those KPIs could be for how long the students have used this solution, which competencies are being learned well, which competencies are not being learned well. So we can really start looking at what are the changes we need to make in those personalized and adaptive framework. So the improvement can be fast tracked. What are the learnings we can have from, if there is a clear consensus which is coming out, that these are the competencies which have been learned well, and these are the competencies which have these features, these are the competencies which are not being learned well through the digital devices. What are the features of that? So it provides some feedback to us also from the program improvement perspective. There has to be a data policy around it, because you will recognize that children data is getting captured, right? So what are the protection around the data policies? What are the mechanisms so the data privacy is taken into consideration? How the data is shared between one entity to another? Because you cannot take a call that no data will be shared. Some of the learning level data, users level data at an aggregated level can be shared. So what are the protocols around the data? This thing need to be defined. There has to be a lot of training which need to be done. The periodicity of the training, the modules of the training, the mode of the training, and so forth needs to be factored into the training aspect of it. The one which is blank currently, it's actually the incentive framework, and that ties in with what we looked at from the in the agriculture case also, the nudge. So nudge also becomes a part of the incentive. What are the incentive for different people to do their task important? Why the community should ask the teachers that their kids also need to be provided the digital education? What is the incentive for teacher to sort of give certain number of hours of their classroom study to the digital devices? What is the incentive for principals to do that? What is the incentive for the state itself, for the senior leaders in the state to really do this program? That is something which is done in a incentive framework. So that's how the program, sort of the diagnosis framework is designed. And the one part which I want to sort of bring it to everyone's attention is approach. This framework can be created before you actually start the work, right? This is basically what are the elements, this thing. Now every piece is assigned to every team member. So there's a 3 to 4 member team. So every piece is given to a team member. So they can dedicatively focus on communication. So one team member might be doing the training and the communication and awareness and the data policy. The other might be doing the tech solution, the school infrastructure, and the human resources. So there is a clear demarcation of responsibility which is given. And now if you look at it from this perspective, where the problem statement was very ambiguous, very open-ended, how to provide access to 10 million, providing digital access to 10 million girls and improving the learning outcomes for those things. It's hard, right? It doesn't give you the starting point because the problem statements are defined from a very objective perspective. It doesn't provide you a very tangible sort of way to move forward. But this framework can help you divide the responsibility, broken down the larger problem statement to sort of a smaller buckets, and jointly they will feed into achieving the outcome which is written at the center of the framework. So that's the one type of framework and the diagnosis framework which has been done. In the paucity of time, I'll just go through the next two frameworks slightly quickly, so we at least have few minutes of time for the final Q&A. The second is once that was completed, we started a pilot in 6 districts. So where we said, okay, now if 3 objectives of ours is the access, equity, and quality, let's just create a design around it. So digital access, these are the 3 ways which the digital access can be done. The ICT labs in the school, that chatbot on the mobile devices, and the tablets, which were some of the tablets which were distributed as a Bunyad infrastructure. Pedagogy will need to be PAL platform, which is more personalized and adaptive. There is a continuous assessment, and the pedagogy need to have an angle of gender and social equity also. So the girls are also incentivized enough. Girls also see enough and more. The language of some of the content is not gender biased. The girls have enough number of sort of the leaders, women leaders, so they can get inspired by those things. So that's the whole element there. Equity, which comes in this thing, how to involve community engagement and gender element to this. SMC, which is the a committee at the ground level, which is combination of the school officials as well as the community people. So how to enable that? There has to be a campaign around involving community, and there is a Gargi Manch, which is very specific, a platform which has been created at different panchayat level, where the government officer also come to this platform and sort of talk about various issues which are relevant for the society, and how to integrate girl education as a topic in those sort of munches and all. So that's the whole point around the equity. Quality is setting up of a cell, because the teams were set up at the state level, at the district level, and they were Gandhi fellows. Some of you might be aware about this. So we sort of use the Gandhi fellows expertise or the ground support in every district to sort of achieve the outcomes and so forth. And that tracking is creating the dashboard around what metric which need to be there and so forth. What should be the cadence of it? We realize that monthly is a better thing because it provides you enough data and that's the right frequency. And then the school visit, because data can only tell you that much, right? But you need to have mechanism where you see those things from your eyes also. What are the school visit cadence for the government officer, for our team and so forth. So we can validate some of the things we are seeing only through the data and the numbers and everything. So that's the framework which was designed for the pilot sort of a work. The pilot ran for roughly 5 to 6 months. And then this is the scale up sort of a program framework at the scale up phase, where we looked at the selection, the awareness, enabling infrastructure, in school implementation, review and monitoring. And then there are certain set of catalyst enabler and that data led sort of enablement. What I'll talk about here is the in-school implementation, because that's slightly different, which is because when you go from scale, in-school ICT lectures per day per grade, so there need to be a mechanism in the state where certain lectures, at least 2 or 3 lectures per week, are assigned on the ICT. Only then it provides a framework for teachers to sort of use those digital devices which are enabled. There is an automated timetable. Because what can happen now practically, if you'll see, if there are grade 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 in a particular school, but most of the time in the government school, there is only one ICT lab. So how do you create the automated sort of a timetable so that lab is optimally used, but at the same time, there is no confusion that we are in period 2 on Monday. Class 8th is also sort of doing the ICT lab, and the class 11th is also doing the ICT lab. So how to remove that operational challenges through the optimal automated timetable that's there. Training of the stakeholder need to be there via the guidebooks and a lot of infographic which need to be done, and the assessment. So state has its own assessment cadence, how to integrate some of the competencies which the students are learning into that sort of a framework. So there is a better alignment or better data availability in terms of how the progress of those things are coming in. The other one which I'll pick is the catalyst sort of enabler, where the idea is how to get the funding, the steering committee. There is a steering committee, which is largely a committee which is by the expert of the private sector as well as government. So taking their input is important on the overall framework and overall progress of the program. So the right set of feedbacks are coming in from the top down. There are various partnerships which need to be done, because when you are reaching a scale of 10 lakh girls, which is 20 lakh plus sort of a student, there are a lot of partnerships which need to be done with the grassroots organization, technological organization, training organizations and so forth. So what is the partnership framework around this? So every box of this framework is further divided into further detailed down, like what we looked at in the previous sort of a case, where we picked one element of the program and we sort of created a framework. Here we are looking at the program level framework first, and then what the team was doing is that every block was further detailed down by the work stream level sort of a framework. So that's how it's been done. Now I'll just, I think I'm done from the case study perspective. Now I'll just, I know we have few more minutes, but I'm happy to stay for another 5-10 more minutes. So if you guys, whoever can stay, you can stay for another 5-10 minutes. But now happy to address any of the question. But before I do that, again, let me make the marketing pitch. We are hiring. To build our team, and a lot of like-minded people who have the passion to sort of solve the complex problem, but at the same time learn and solve this problem in a very professional manner. If you are looking for those kind of opportunity, GDI could be a potential place for you. So please go to our LinkedIn, please go to our website and do apply. The applications are open till Sunday, the 18th of September. That's about us. Now, yes, we are open to hiring the freshers as well. So yes, the answer is yes. Yes.
Ankur, we have one question in the chat. How do we define success in few initial days?
How do you define success in the initial days? Ankur, just I can answer this question in a very different tangent. So can you be slightly more specific, please?
Yeah, so really the question here is that, when you are in the planning stage of the project or the case, it's very important to agree that what is it that as a group we are aspiring for, and what is it that will, give us that aha moment that we've cracked the problem. So this is definitely different from the deliverables, because we know the case deliverables, what the case deliverables are, but what is that milestone, or how do we identify that milestone in the first few days itself, so that everyone aspires towards it?
Yeah, I think very good question. So I think the aha moment is I would say in the initial days, because I'm talking about that phase where the execution have not started, where you have not starting seeing the outcome metrics like the uses or the learning level and so forth. I think in the government system, the very good start can be how greater alignment you have with your stakeholder. It could be your partners, it could be your government, it could be those things where they are as excited to do this case, or as excited to solve the problem which is at hand. And it takes sometimes a long time, sometimes it takes less time, but I think that's the first piece. In the initial time, I think one is the framework, how comprehensive those things. I'm not going there, because I think as professionals, that's a bread and butter, and that is most of the time gets solved for. But I think the alignment, the excitement you generate, and a confidence you generate in the group that these things are possible. Because if you look at the problems which you're solving, whether it's the air quality for Delhi, the digital learning for 1 million girls, or modernizing the agriculture sector, or using the power of data for all the schemes and services in the state of Andhra, these are the most aspirational statements which the country is struggling with today. And at times, there is some sort of a pessimism around these things, whether these can get solved or there is a lip service around this, right? So if you can create that momentum, if you can create that belief, I think that's very important to solve this sort of a problem, because at the end of the day, it's the people who will solve this problem. So there has to be a greater excitement, greater belief in the group which need to come. Hopefully, Ankur addressed your.
Yeah. Thanks.
We have one more question by Midula. Is data necessary? I mean, the experience with data necessary for applying?
Yeah. No. Answer is no. No and yes. Let me also give the yes also. So no, no previous experience is important, and there are a lot of team members in the team who don't have experience, but the attitude need to be there to learn this, because data is a very necessary skill when you're solving problems at scale. So we don't look for this data experience in your CV, in your other submission, which you'll make throughout the process. But I think the attitude needs to be there, that I want to learn this, because this is a great tool to sort of solve the problem. Yeah. Vandana has asked, what are the incentives for the governments, for the stakeholder engaged in education, like district education officer, SCRT director, to ensure effective implementation of the program? because they are all government employees and they are usually not so motivated to give extra hours of training and all. Vandana, not really, don't agree with this completely. I think the belief, like I said, if there is a belief that the problem can be solved, if not all, many people want to sort of solve these problems, right? Who would not want to solve the problem for students not getting the greatest of the education, right? Everyone wants to, but I think there's sometimes the faith just goes away. That can we really solve it? And I think that's a big task, to bring in the confidence in the machinery that this is solved. And at times you need to also, I don't necessarily say that you need to increase the number of hours for them. Sometime earlier in the presentation, I talked about the process reengineering part, where the idea is, if today they are taking 2 hours to do the task, can you really reduce that to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so they can get another 1.5 hours or something more to do something which is more important for the student? And that's where you need to create that balance and so forth. What is important? How can we help the user, right? And user in this case is various level of layers of government machinery. So how do you do that? That's a task which is at hand. And team is always looking for those ways to reduce the burden on the government machinery. So they have extra time to do the extra stuff which is there. How do you define KPIs? Shubham, at the program level, the KPIs are defined as what the mandate of the government is. So if you really look at mandate of a government in the education department is really to provide better access, better quality of education and so forth. So at the program level, it's self-defined, right? This thing. In the Delhi, if you ask the environment minister, they'll always say, I want to improve the quality of air. So at the program level, it's self-explanatory. It has to be the most ambitious problem statement of that particular department where we are working in. The work stream level is something which needs to be defined in. The KPIs needs to be defined in. It could be number of students we have reached, the learning outcome, sort of the usage target, or the school number of school visit, or some of them this thing which is very contextual, not the right platform for me to go into that. But some are very self-explanatory. I would say it's not something which is trickier. Once you know what needs to be achieved, then how to measure it is not a hugely difficult task, I would say. Aman is asking, do we have some standard issue tree available to solve impact problem with less? Yes, there is one. Again, I'll request Shaishta and Rashi to sort of note it down. And we have one very happy to sort of share with the audience who signed up for this. So we can, when we're sending them this, we can send the standard issue tree as well. So thanks, Aman, we'll do that. We have one which we internally use at GDI. We'll be happy to share that.
Deshna, we can also go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, am I audible?
Now you are.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Hi, Ankur. Thanks for the session. I have a small question. So with respect to approaching a concept note, what generally happens is that you are given a broader problem statement and you're expected to give a solution, right? The issue that I face sometimes is that because the time period is very short, it's difficult for me to understand the problem deeply in order to give the solution. Like the first step itself comes as a problem, because a lot of times you don't have the domain knowledge, right? So if you're giving a problem, for example, of the agriculture sector, and if I am being given just 1 day to solve it, I don't know the problem deeply. So for me to give the solution, it's I don't know if I'm doing justification to that, because I don't know the problem. So what do you advise? Like, if should a person do secondary research or talk to an expert, or what does GDI expect from a candidate in such situations?
Very good question, Deshna. Let me give you a practical answer to this. I think most of the problem statement we are solving. So like for that matter, Shaishta is here. I'm sure I think Shaishta has not worked on agriculture domain. That's what we want people to learn, right? When the context changes, when the sector changes, how can you still come up with this thing? Obviously, if there is a context, it's great. But what we believe in a journalistic sort of a consulting sort of approach is the approach is more important, right? So approach is more important rather than knowing the context and all. Once you know the context, obviously your framework will be more sharper. Your problems sort of solving will become sharper. But day zero also, what we call ourselves is the system sort of expert. We know we are the problem solver. We are not a problem solver for education, or we are not a problem solver for agriculture. That's why the important thing is problem solving, right? And what we believe is that problem solving mindset or a problem solving framework can be developed without knowing the context a lot more. But once you know the context, your sort of framework start to become more sharper. Your understanding of what is important, what is not so important becomes sort of more important. The phasing becomes more practical, and those things become practical. But I think that's a training. I'll say that's a muscle you need to build, and that's a skill you need to build. How variety of cases you look at it, but you will start finding a lot of common factors in these kind of things, right? So that's the whole idea. Disha, again, in 5 minutes can't give you the answer, but I think it's more about practice, right?
Okay, understood. Thank you.
We will take a couple of more questions before we close the session. We have a few team members also, Rashi, Shakshi, Shesha, Srijan. They can share their own experience. Ayushi is also here, so they can share their experience. Why don't you start, Rashi? I know you came, you can give your experience pre the GDI and what you are doing. I think that will be helpful for the participants.
Thank you, Ankur. So I was actually attending one of these masterclasses a while ago when it happened in February. And it's actually really interesting being on the other side of the picture right now. So for a context for you all, before this, I was working as a Teach for India fellow for the last 2 years. And since my college days, I have been involved in a lot of social entrepreneurship projects, which brought me to the development sector right now. Currently at GDI, I am working with the state government of Uttar Pradesh on a project called Digital Transformation Unit, where we are using EdTech for teachers, for students, and for the government officials to actually improve the internal processes of the system. Talking about my experience, so I have worked with multiple problem statements over the 4 months that I have been involved with GDI. And it has been truly interesting to know how do you go from problem statement to problem statement, develop different hypotheses and test them out in different situations. Okay, there's an interesting question on the chat box as well. I'll just wrap up my experience and come to that. Second thing, which was really challenging for me, was understanding the details of the problem statement in such short period of time. So you come into the problem and you are directly dealing with the stakeholders. We are doing the front end role for everyone who walks in. You are dealing with the government stakeholders, with the partners who are working on the project, and you need to know the context of the project at the same time. So it was quite challenging, but much helpful in terms of growth and in knowledge as well. Shweta, would you like to add? I think Rashi and I share mostly the background where I was also a Teach for India fellow, worked with Rashi in multiple social entrepreneurship projects, and then we came together at GDI. I think where Rashi is posing the challenge of interacting with multiple stakeholders, what helped was initially we were looking at very micro level stakeholder interaction. Now currently at our role, we interact with multiple stakeholders, be it funders, be it partner organizations, government stakeholders are one of our partners. But we also have multiple partners in the sector. I think that has helped us a lot in terms of cracking the problem, creating the framework, and strategically planning the next steps for them. I think that's all from my end. Ankur, if you could answer the question which was posed in the chat box.
Yeah, Shardul, you asked the question. No, the political connection. First of all, we don't have the political connection, and doesn't help on the project at all. It's about, and the idea is also just to understand, we need to understand people who are behind this in different states and so forth. No, I think the answer to the second question, do political collection help on project? No, it absolutely doesn't. And we don't encourage also to have those connections, the personal connections and so forth. The first is what attitude requires for a field researcher at GDI. I think the attitude is very, very clear. You need to have a problem solving mindset. You need to know how to manage people better. You need to have great communication skills, both verbal and sort of written. These are the skills, or these are the attitude which is required. And not the least, I think there are some values we have put for ourselves at GDI, and those values are on our website. So would request you go through those. And if that aligns with you, I think you will find a great professional home at GDI. So that's what I think. Sakshi is also there. Sakshi comes from a slightly different background. So I'll request Sakshi if you can come in and share your experience for the benefit of the group. If you can.
Okay. Thanks for answering.
Hi everyone, Sakshi this side. So I come from a slightly different background. As Ankur mentioned, I have done my bachelor's from Shahid Sukhdev College of Business Studies, and I did my BMS from there. Then right after college, I joined GDI, and like Rashi said earlier, as well as her, I also did some projects in college, social entrepreneurship projects, which inclined me towards this sector. And during that time, I was looking for certain opportunities, and thankfully, GDI came to college that year. And that was the first time it came, and it literally landed me with a great opportunity. And for a fresher, especially, I would consider it one of the best opportunities to hone your soft and hard skills in the sector. Both your interpersonal skills, both your consulting skills, which are required in any kind of field, not just consulting specifically. I think that set of combination of skills is something which you can find here, and which I got, to be very honest, which I got as a fresher, and now I can proudly say I have those skills, and that has helped me. I can see through earlier the mindset, the structured approach that you have, how you think about a problem, what you should do next. So that approach and that mindset changes a lot while you work in the sector and the way you work in the sector. And I think the people around you work with, and at GDI we have an amazing team really. With each and everyone, we can really learn from each other. So that helps a lot for me. I think that's been a great experience for me till now.
We also have Srijan on board. Srijan also comes with a different background. Srijan, if you could come and share your experience.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. So I come from a sort of a legislative research, policy research background. So I had the habit of, looking at policy or any impact-oriented solutions very broadly. But what I've learned coming to GDI is how do you make those changes happen on ground? How do the recommendations that you usually give translate on ground, and how do they, how do you make the government systems work to implement those solutions? So that has been a great learning. And I would say what goes behind is those development of soft skills and hard skills which happen while you're working on the project. So there's a lot of skill building, but the major learning for me has been how do you make change happen on ground.
So I think we're coming almost to the end. So I'll just say, hopefully with whatever you do in your career, I hope today's session give you tools or some tricks to sort of solve for very, very meaningful sort of a problem statement, whether in the social sector domain or outside it. Hopefully it's of use to you guys, and do well in the career. And we look forward to staying in touch with all of you. We keep posting a lot of updates on our LinkedIn page, on our website, which is active right now. I think there is some glitch, sometimes it gets slowed, but team sort of is solving for those. So yeah, that's from our side. But I thoroughly enjoyed answering some of the questions, and I learned in the process of you asking some of the questions. So thanks for your time, and yeah, so enjoy the Sunday. That's from my side. Thank you. Do well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for enlightening us.
Thank you all for joining in. I'm ending this meeting here, and we can catch up later. Bye all.